Disclaimer. Comet Hale-Bopp belongs to Alan Hale and Thomas Bopp. That's how this works, right? Comet brings death to Muggles. 39 commit mass suicide in America. Hermione was shocked when she saw the headline in Daily Prophet. Normally, she wouldn't have believed it. Stories in the Prophet, however distorted, often had some kernel of truth to them, but she wouldn't be surprised if they invented a story about Muggles out of whole cloth, especially from overseas. Still, she wanted to be sure. She didn't have much contact with the Muggle world these days, and the other Muggle-borns she talked to mostly only had contact through letters. So she slipped away to try to find a Muggle library to try to find a reliable source. She went out of her way to find some back issues of the New York Times, and she was horrified to see it was all true, right there on the front page. Videotapes left by 39 who died, described the cult's suicide goal. The 39 men and women found dead in a mass suicide at an estate here were members of an obscure computer-related cult who left behind videotapes describing their intentions, and they appeared to believe that the Hale-Bopp comet now streaking across the sky was their ticket to heaven. A site on the World Wide Web called Heaven's Gate, and apparently created by the cult, makes repeated references to a Doe and his deputy, T. In effusive language, the page describes the presence of the Hale-Bopp comet as the marker we've been waiting for, the time for the arrival of the spacecraft from the level above human to take us home to their world, in the literal heavens. It had taken nearly 2 weeks for the story to filter through to the magical world. When it finally did, the wizards described it in even more lurid terms than the Muggles did. It played perfectly into the almost Victorian apocalyptic fixation of Wizarding Britain today. For the next few days, it seemed to be all anyone was talking about when she slipped out to Hogwarts or Diagon Alley, and they feared the comet even more as a dread omen. To Hermione, though, it felt like a punch in the gut. To have astronomy, something that she so loved, that was an escape for her, marred by such tragedy, felt awful. Not to mention that it played into the same astrological nonsense in Britain that probably partially contributed to the suicides in the first place. But there wasn't anything she could do about that. She just had to keep going. She wasn't going to let it stop her from continuing her work on the night vision charm, which was now ready for testing. She hoped things would quiet down by the time it came time to actually use it in her planned visits to Professor Sinestra's astronomy classes. Hermione did receive one bit of good, if morbid, news when she next went to Hogwarts. "Did you still want the results of those tests of the killing curse you asked for, Miss Granger?" Snape asked. Hermione perked up at once. "You actually did the animal tests?" she said. "I did. Upon further consideration, I decided to trust you that it was relevant to your mission. It was merely a matter of acquiring the animals without suspicion." "Thank you so much, Professor," Hermione said. "What did you find?" "The jellyfish died. The man-o'-war died in its entirety, despite its colonial nature. However, the Pyrosoma Atlanticum, and you owe me for the effort it took to find that one, died only in a cylindrical section marking the path of the spell. And most interestingly, the sea sponge exploded when the curse struck it like a plant would. I was most surprised to find that some of the fragments were still alive. Did you expect that to happen?" "I thought it was a possibility," Hermione answered. "Sponges barely count as animals anyway, and they can regenerate from tiny fragments, so they might be better regarded as some kind of sub-animals for this discussion. Anyway, that proves that the killing curse almost certainly targets the nervous system. The man-o'-war's nervous system is connected, but the Pyrosomes isn't, and the sponge doesn't have one." Snape was unimpressed. "That is all well and good, but do you really think that will help you destroy a Horcrux?" She shook her head. "A regular Horcrux? Probably not. But solving Harry's problem? It could be just the clue I need. And I still want to see if I can find a way to block that curse." "I see. I suspect you are on a fool's errand, Miss Granger, but I have long since learnt not to underestimate you."
Thank you, Professor. I think."
The first round of apparition tests were held on the 21st of April, when about 2/3 of the 6th years would be of age to take them. 2 more tests would be held before the end of the school year for those who came of age later or who failed the first test. Harry, obviously, wasn't of age, but he wouldn't have been able to show his face anyway. However, he had confided to Hermione that Sirius had been teaching him how to apparate in secret so that he would know how to do it, although he wasn't making great progress. Hermione would have objected, seeing as how it was both dangerous and illegal, but neither of those things were a big consideration right now, and he was being appropriately supervised. Hermione joined in with the other test takers to get her side-along apparition certification. She didn't talk to many people. Her only close friend who was there in Hogsmeade was Ron, but she had a nice chat with him, and then a not-so-nice one when he handed her a smudged, blotchy letter. "What's this?" she asked. "Hagrid wanted me to give it to you. Apparently his giant hairy spider friend died, and he wants his other friends to be there for the burial tonight." Ron looked terrified at the very thought. "Giant spider friend?" she said. She knew about Aragog. An acromantula it had to be, and there were just so many things wrong with that. "Yeah, no. I'd have just as well never known about it," Ron agreed. "I don't know if I can stay that late, especially on a weekday," she said. "Security's a lot tighter at night." "I'm just passing it along," he said. "I'm doing everything I can to stay out of it. I told Luna about it. She'd probably appreciate it more." "Yes, that's true," she agreed. She looked down at the letter. It was stained in great blotches from Hagrid's heavy tears. He sounded absolutely devastated by it. Part of her thought he was mental, especially for asking her and Ron out on the castle grounds after dark. But another part of her really appreciated Hagrid for his ability to love any creature, no matter how hideous. It was a trait that Luna shared, she thought. She would be a good fit to comfort Hagrid during the burial. Hermione didn't exactly care for acromantulas herself, but they were still sentient creatures who were marginalized as savage beasts, though, admittedly, they did eat people. And Aragog deserved a proper burial because of that. But even though she felt some respect for the creature and compassion for Hagrid, and even some morbid curiosity at seeing a real acromantula, she really didn't think she could go. Things were just too dangerous these days. The side-along apparition test was very similar to the regular apparition test, a worryingly short test riding on a single apparition, although this time there were healers standing by in case she splinched her passenger. Over the weeks, she had progressed from the rag doll to a dressmaker's dummy, to a suit of armor, and finally a full-weight, posable wooden mannequin that weighed more than she did. At the same time, she changed her own pose from a tight hug to a side hug to linking arms to just holding hands at the end. Only when she could side along the full-weight mannequin perfectly was she allowed to try it with humans, and by then it didn't seem very hard, even if it was an emergency measure that took a lot of concentration. One quick jaunt, and she'd successfully apparated a live human by the hand, and she received her new license. When she did, a thought occurred to her that hadn't the last time, that perhaps the lessons themselves were part of the test. The instructors were the testers, after all, and they would know whether they were ready to take the test based on their performance in the lessons. Of course, even then, some people failed. "Half an eyebrow," Ron complained. "I left half an eyebrow behind. Like that's going to matter." "I know it sounds harsh, Ronald," she tried to calm him, "but it was on your face. You read the pamphlet. A mistake like that can be worse than leaving a whole hand or foot behind." Ron kept grumbling, but he didn't argue the point. It was embarrassing, but it wasn't like he needed it for another 2 months. Hermione thought he was in more of a bad mood from Hagrid's request than failing the test. She scribbled down a polite apology for not being able to attend the burial for Ron to send back to him. She didn't hear back directly, but Ginny's next letter to her, sent through Dobby, was very amusing. "Ron owes me big time. Luna roped me into going to Hagrid's funeral for a giant spider, and I had to go because I've got the Marauder's map. The thing was the size of an elephant. It was dead, and I'm still having nightmares." Not long afterwards, Hermione's night vision charm was finally done, and it was more beautiful than she had dreamed. In consultation with Professor Sinistra, 2 special astronomy sessions were planned to introduce the students of 3rd year and up to the spell. These sessions were scheduled for Saturday and Sunday night, or technically Sunday and Monday morning, of the last weekend of April. It wasn't an ideal time. It was a balancing act between the loss of true night with the rapidly retreating sunset at that far northern latitude, and the stubbornly inconvenient phase of the moon. There were only 4 or 5 days when it would be possible to observe the comet in full darkness, and even that was still near the horizon. But nonetheless, the view of the whole sky from that charm was magnificent beyond words. The first night was the night for the 5th years and for the few Newt students. Hermione greeted the class along with Professors Sinistra and Flitwick, who had also joined them. Some of them knew her from Dumbledore's army, and many of them were aware of her guest teaching the younger students' defense classes last term, so they were interested in what she had to say.
"Good evening," she told them. "For those of you who don't know, my name is Hermione Granger. I'm a certified arithmancer, and Professor Sinistra has graciously agreed to let me come out and help teach a special session of your astronomy class. You've probably been watching Comet Hale-Bopp in class all month by now." She motioned to the comet, which had brightened to a lovely magnitude -1 with a long dust tail that stretched far up from the horizon. "I'm here because I wanted to give you a chance to observe it and the sky in general better than is normally possible with the instruments we have here. You should also be familiar with the night vision potion you use occasionally in this class. I have been working with Professor Flitwick and a few of the other teachers to develop a night vision charm that complements the potion and greatly enhances your night vision, and we wanted to try it with you." The students seemed eager. A few of them didn't sound fond of the idea, and a few more were grumbling about spending so much time on the comet, but most of them wanted to see this almost as much as Hermione did. "I warn you," Professor Sinistra spoke up, "this spell makes you even more sensitive to bright light than the potion does, and yet more so by using them together. Exposure to intense light, even moonlight, could cause you serious problems, so I want no funny business while we're up here. And make sure to cancel the spell before you go back inside. I advise you not to attempt to cast it on yourselves, but if you insist, you should only do so in truly dark conditions."
The students agreed to this, and Hermione, Sinistra, and Flitwick went around and began casting the spell on each of the students whilst handing out the night vision potions.
"Octoroshan!"
Hermione cast carefully on one student after another, moving through the complicated wand movements with precision. Each of them gasped when the spell took effect.
"Now, this spell doesn't work quite as well as it could on your color vision," she noted. "It's designed just for light sensitivity. We're working on one that works specifically on color vision, but it's much more complicated. The subtleties of the perception of light and color with the human eye are, well, they're beyond the scope of this discussion. If I tried to do it now, it would sort of work, but it wouldn't look at all natural."
Most of the students were too busy staring at the sky to pay attention, and Hermione chuckled to herself. She was sure the spell would be a big hit when it reached the journals, too. They didn't feel too bad about publishing the spell, or rather an outline of how it was created. They were still looking into royalties. It was enough information that a skilled arithmancer could recreate it and possibly use it against her. But that wasn't too bad, since she also knew its weakness. They didn't have too much time before moonrise, so she got right to it and cast the charm herself and also drank the potion. Then she looked up, and it was all she could do not to fall flat on her back in ecstasy. Thump! And there went the first student. She wasn't surprised to hear that it was Colin Creevey. The Muggle-borns would be more prone to that reaction. She had admitted she was a little worried about Luna, but the little Ravenclaw was still on her feet, almost floating, transfixed by the sight. For once, Hermione completely understood how she felt. It was the first time Hermione had tried her charm with the night vision potion, which locked in the eye's dark adaptation and magically dilated the pupils, and she was lost in the beauty. Under normal conditions, even with dark skies, it was possible to see only about 5,000 stars from the astronomy tower. But now, with her night vision enhanced right up to the limits of the laws of optics, she could see well over 100,000. Even the Milky Way was no longer a mere cloud, but a luminous band of jewels twinkling across the northern horizon. Comet Hale-Bopp was a brilliant blue and white flame. Mars was so bright it was almost painful to her eyes. When she got her telescope out, she was gone. The sky was so bright that she could pick out star clusters and galaxies at a glance, and she jumped from one to another so fast she was oblivious to everything else. The double cluster, the great cluster of Hercules, the Whirlpool Galaxy, the Pinwheel Galaxy, Bode's Galaxy, the Cigar Galaxy, the Ring Nebula, and more. Even supernova remnant were visible. The Veil Nebula was easy, and she even managed to pick out Cassiopeia A. In Cygnus, she could clearly see the shape of the North American Nebula. The brightest star-forming region in the limited part of the galaxy she could see, never more than a faint fuzzy patch to the unassisted eye. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and Hermione was broken out of her trance when an argument broke out among the students about the comet. Professor Sinistra had been doing what Hermione was reasonably sure was a decent job of explaining the mechanics of it, but some of the students took issue.
"Why are we spending so much time on this bloody comet?" one of the fifth years yelled. "Things are bad enough already without obsessing over that."
"But maybe it'll help us predict what's going to happen in the war," a boy pointed out as Professor Sinistra tried to calm them down.
"All it's predicting is that things are terrible and going to get worse."
Fierce debate broke out over the relative merits of analyzing the comet for divination purposes.
"Oh, comets are much more complex than that," Luna spoke up. "Even when they predict a doom, we don't know whose doom it is. It could be you-know-whose, or it could be Princess Diana's, or it could be the President of Zaires. We can't say for sure. I just think they're pretty, don't you?"
Wait, what? Hermione thought. That was random, even for Luna.
"What are you talking about, Loony?"
Lavender snapped. Lavender and Parvati were two of the small class of Newt astronomy students, given its application to divination.
"It's obviously about the doom of magical Britain. Professor Trelawney said so lots of times."
The fight was playing out in a view as plain as day with Hermione's enhanced night vision, so she could see the hurt on Luna's face.
"Lavender," she said. "It's true," Lavender said. "The Muggles have it all wrong. You don't do divination for Muggles. It only works for magical people. Comets are a bad omen for us, and the second in 2 years." "For the love of God, it's not a bad omen!" Hermione shouted. "All this bad stuff happened before either comet showed up. You-know-who came back before they were visible. It's just that you didn't want to believe it until it was staring you in the face."
She pointed at Lavender, then waved vaguely at the rest of the crowd.
"Miss Granger," Professor Sinistra started. "Hey," Lavender said. "I said I was sorry about that. I believed it as soon as the stars said so." "Or you could have just listened to trustworthy witnesses," Hermione said. "The stars are trustworthy. Professor Trelawney—"
She stopped and choked down her words before she said something she'd regret. She was a fraud who did most of her act with theatrics and cold reading, she thought.
"Professor Trelawney had 2 confirmed prophecies to her name, Lavender, and I'm going to stick to worrying about those because those 2 prophecies have done more, good and bad, than all the horoscopes in Britain. Honestly, the star signs don't even match the calendar anymore. I don't need them to tell me how to fight Death Eaters. Good night."
She stomped back into the castle, only to collapse from the sudden migraine and nearly fall down the stairs when the first torch she saw blinded her. She canceled the spell and conjured a pair of sunglasses to wear until the forced dark adaptation of the potion wore off. Then she sat on the stairs moaning softly until her head stopped pounding.
"Hermione?"
Parvati's voice called behind her.
"Whoa, Hermione, are you okay?" "Forgot to cancel the night vision," she groaned. "I'll be fine." "Oh, well, I wanted to say that wasn't very nice of you. Lavender's been under a lot of stress." "I know, I'm sorry," Hermione cut in. "I didn't mean to hurt her, or you. I know how much Professor Trelawney meant to you. It's just divination, and astrology in particular." "Yes, I remember your rants back in 3rd year. You were even harsher back then."
Parvati gave her a pointed look. Hermione sighed.
Parv, we're not going to agree on this. I have my opinions on divination, and I think I said all I needed to say back there. I'm just sick and tired of this morbid fascination with Comet Hale-Bopp as an omen of doom, when it should be a beautiful astronomical event. But you have to admit the timing is worrying, she said. Even the Muggles— Don't even go there, Parv, Hermione cut her off. Those Muggles died because they followed a nutcase who believed he was possessed by space aliens who were going to beam them up to a ship that was hiding behind the comet. It was a cult. It had nothing whatsoever to do with astrology of any type. Okay, she said. Look, we're still on your side, both of us. This is just a hard time for us. Well, that's kind of you. Ron's really the one you should talk to. He's in charge of the DA now. I've got my own projects for the war effort. This was just the best chance I had to take a break. Oh, I'm sorry then. It's fine. Hopefully tomorrow will go better.
The next night did indeed go better. The third and fourth years were more dazzled by the stars and less fixated on dire predictions. They were enraptured when Hermione explained the deep sky to them, something that wasn't covered very well on the curriculum in her opinion. For herself, she wore herself out watching the sky, and at the end of the lesson she relaxed by gazing out at the black lake from the ramparts, as tranquil and full of stars as the sky itself. With the great bulk of the castle and the blinding points of light of the torches blocked from her view, she felt almost like she was floating in the air, perhaps high up at the edge of space with the whole universe turning around her. As these idle thoughts flitted through her mind, something more concrete began to form, an idea to revisit something she had previously discarded, although it would be several days before she could put it clearly enough to ask. And the Weasleys, even George and Fred, probably weren't the best people to ask about it. She would, she decided, need Sirius for this one. Hermione hadn't been out to see Sirius much since Harry went into hiding with him, but she did know how to get there. Discreetly, with a mixture of apparition and Muggle methods. Sirius was glad to see her, but she had business to take care of.
Sirius, I heard a rumor that you've been teaching Harry apparition, she told him. Is that true?
Sirius smirked at her cheekily and said, "Who wants to know?"
I take it you know how to reverse a splinching, then?
If it's one that doesn't require healer's intervention, yes.
Good. I might ask you for some pointers on that. I've only learnt the basics so far, but the main reason I came here was that I want to extend my apparition skills.
Extend them? How? You already have your side-along license, don't you?
Yes, but I was thinking more along the lines of something they wouldn't have formal lessons for, something I'd need a spotter to try. Harry, you might be interested in this too. Have you ever heard of someone apparating out of water?
Out of water? Sirius thought for a minute, briefly confused by the odd question. No, not that I can think of, but I don't see why it wouldn't work either, except you'd be disoriented and weightless, so it would be quite a bit harder.
That's what I was thinking, she agreed. I don't think it would even be that hard. It's more of a mental exercise, really. I want to try to teach myself. Harry, are you interested?
Harry looked surprised by the conversation, but he thought about it and nodded slowly. I guess it could be useful if you get dropped on a lake or something. I don't know if I'm at that level yet, though. You're doing fine, Harry, Sirius assured him. If you want to do it, I'll spot for both of you if we can find a safe place to do it. I don't know how useful it would be, but it could be fun. Hermione nodded, but she smirked inwardly. This was just the first step.
I was also thinking about apparating onto a moving platform. I know that's possible, just very difficult.
A moving platform? Sirius said in surprise. Yeah, that's a hell of a hard thing to do. It'd be useful, getting onto a moving train or something, but I don't know how you'd practice it safely.
Don't worry, Sirius. I have an idea or two.
The location to practice apparition out of water was a private swimming pool that Sirius rented out for a pool party. Even as a technical fugitive, he still had access to copious amounts of gold through Gringotts. He confunded the staff to leave and put up Muggle-repelling charms while they practiced. Then, with considerable effort, Hermione carefully filtered the impurities out of the water, leaving it as pure as if it were distilled. In case of a serious splinching, they didn't want chlorine, or hypochlorous acid rather, Hermione had learnt to appreciate precision in chemistry, or anything else going into the wounds. For Hermione, apparating out of a pool was surprisingly easy. She needed some practice, and there were splinchings, but she got it down quickly since she'd already done the hard conceptual work with her side-along lessons. Harry, however, was another story. He was just reaching proficiency with a regular apparition, and Hermione soon figured out he was making the same mistake she had been of feeling with proprioception instead of properly visualizing. She did her best to teach him the correct technique, and she liked to think she was doing quite a bit better than Mr. Twycross, but when he splinched himself a little too close to his torso for comfort, Sirius called a stop and said he should back off and work on his fundamentals some more. Hermione's idea for practicing apparition onto a moving platform was an old train yard. A handcar that had a large enough flat bed on it could be padded and used as a landing platform to apparate onto, and could be run at variable speed on the tracks without the complication of an engine-powered vehicle. Of course, the train yard didn't actually have a handcar large enough to do that, but it wasn't hard for the three of them to assemble one with magic and enchant it to roll on its own. Sirius even arranged a long oval of tracks for it to roll on, with an ease she hadn't expected him to be able to pull off. "This does look like a good idea," he said when he finished. "I might try my hand at this myself. It could be useful sometime."
"I'm hoping so," Hermione agreed. "Make the handcar go a little faster. Good."
The handcart was rolling along the track at about 5 miles an hour.
"I don't understand exactly what needs to be done," she admitted, "but I think I can make a good guess. You just have to be more careful accounting for the relative motion."
"What does that mean?" Harry asked.
"Well, think of it this way, Harry. If you apparate any significant distance on Earth, because of the rotation of the Earth, that place is moving relative to where you are now in an inertial reference frame. But that's not a problem, because you visualize yourself arriving at rest relative to your destination, and so you do. For this, you need to visualize yourself landing at rest relative to the moving handcar. That's harder because we see it moving from here, but if you do it right, you should land on the handcar smoothly."
"Uh-huh," he said skeptically. Thinking you should try it first." Hermione could understand his reticence. She was wearing full skater gear for this herself. Helmet, knee pads, elbow pads, and padded gloves. If it were just 1 or 2 falls, she wouldn't have bothered, but she was anticipating falling down a lot in this exercise.
"Of course," she said. "Well, here goes."
She waited until the enchanted handcar came around to one of the straightaways. It would be much harder to try to apparate to it on a curve. Then she carefully visualized herself appearing on the flat bed and moving with it. She turned on the spot, apparated, and immediately felt the ground lurch under her. She fell flat on her face, bounced off the side of the handcar, rolled off, and flopped onto her back on the ground. Harry and Sirius rushed to her side. "Hermione, are you all right?" Harry said.
"I'm fine," she said. "Honestly, that's about what I was expecting would happen."
She tried a few more times and improved significantly. She had to visualize being at rest on the handcar and shut the rest of the world out of her thoughts. If she did it right, she found, she wouldn't actually feel the shift in velocities any more than she felt the shift when apparating from one end of the country to the other. After enough tries, she managed to stand on the handcar and stay on her feet. Then she asked Sirius to increase the speed, and she failed again, though she was able to compensate quickly. She didn't get all that far, though, in terms of speed, before the three of them decided to slow it down again so that Sirius and Harry could have a go. They both transfigured helmets to wear, even Sirius, who didn't seem like the type to wear one, but he'd seen Hermione take enough falls to know he'd need it. Sirius actually caught on fairly quickly and enjoyed the little game, but Harry wasn't quite at that level yet. All in all, it was a good start. It would take some time, but Hermione was pretty sure it would work. And then she could combine her 2 skills for what she really wanted to do, the idea that had begun to come to her on the astronomy tower. Apparating high in the air and back down out of free fall to get out of a tight spot when she didn't know where she was. The principles were the same, just applied a bit differently. She suspected more than a few wizards could do it already, if they thought of it, so she really wanted to have it in her repertoire. The last Quidditch match of the year was neither particularly exciting nor particularly long. It was Gryffindor versus Ravenclaw for the Quidditch Cup, with Ravenclaw at a large disadvantage, even more so because of Cho's death. Ron had kicked Cormac McLagan off the Gryffindor team and replaced him with Dean Thomas, so their chaser squad was much more coherent overall. And to top it all off, Ginny caught the snitch very quickly, winning the cup for Gryffindor by a large margin. It was somewhat fitting that the shortened Quidditch game gave Bill, Hermione, and Harry extra time to sort through the Room of Requirement. They'd searched a solid majority of it for Horcruxes by now, and they were still confident of getting all the way through it by the end of the school year, if necessary. Hermione hadn't noticed any evidence of anyone else sneaking into the Room of Requirement to repair the vanishing cabinet on her map, so they merely kept a quiet watch on it in the meantime. It was tedious work, especially for Bill, and it required constant focus because a single misstep around a dark item, Horcrux or not, could have catastrophic results. Today, however, things were different. About half an hour in, Bill let out a shout. "Harry, Hermione, I think I've found it." "You found it?" Harry said. "Finally?" "I think so. You said Ravenclaw's diadem was one of the potential items, didn't you?" Hermione and Harry rushed to his side and looked as he pointed to a circlet of silver lying carelessly on top of a pile of junk. An eagle in delicate silver filigree, studded with sapphires and many small diamonds, and on the front, as they drew closer, they saw there were words carved in a flowing feminine script. "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure." "My God!" Hermione breathed. "This is really Rowena Ravenclaw's lost diadem?" "It looks like it," Bill said soberly. "No one's seen it for sure since Ravenclaw herself lost it, but it looks just like it does in the portraits and sculptures. And it's riddled with dark magic. Merlin, anyone who would think of tainting such a priceless historical artifact? It's horrible." "Don't touch it," Harry said. "That's how Dumbledore got cursed." "No, I know. The question is, what do we do with it?" "We should take it with us," Hermione said. "There's not much risk that someone would notice it's missing. After all, you know who isn't likely to tell anyone about it, and if we destroy it here, there's at least as much risk of it being found out." "Definitely," Harry agreed. "And if we just leave it, you know who could move it." "That'll be hard to do safely," Bill cautioned. "We can't touch it, and we don't know if it might have some effect just from its aura. We don't know exactly what happened to Dumbledore, and we do know what the diary did to Ginny." "Actually, I planned for this," Hermione said. She knelt down and rummaged around in her handbag, taking out a heavy box with a shiny silver-white surface. When she opened it, the inner surface was revealed to be gold, with two dark gray layers sandwiched in between. She stepped back and levitated the diadem into the box, closed it, and cast Locotharmeth. A flash of sparks sealed the box all the way around, making it seamless. Was that gold?" Bill said. "Just gold foil," she admitted. "I used it for its alchemical purity and resistance to corrosion. The inner structural layer is tungsten. I used that because it makes the best radiation shielding, better than lead, certainly. I don't know if that'll help, but I hope it will. Then I used carbon nanotubes for strength, the same stuff as my sword, and the surface is titanium plated. There's not much alchemical literature on titanium, but it's one of the most hypoallergenic metals, so I'm hoping it'll be alchemically neutral and block detrimental effects." "Merlin," Bill said. "That's impressive, Hermione. I don't know if it'll work, but I don't think I could come up with anything better. Well, I guess we're done here." "Can we at least do something to sabotage the vanishing cabinet before we go?" Harry said. "There's a lot we could do. The danger is if a Death Eater comes in here, notices someone else has been in here, and reports it to you-know-who." "What about an alarm set to go off if someone tampers with it?" "Like a silent alarm, you mean?" Hermione asked. "I could try, but we'd need something to receive it, and I can't get a magical signal out of here even with my map. I think the room doesn't properly exist when no one's in it." "Oh, wait, what about a protean charm?" he said.
"No, that's the same problem. It would—" Hermione trailed off, and her eyes widened. "Of course! It would go blank when the room's closed, and it would reappear when the room's opened again. This version of the room, with the vanishing cabinet in it. We'd know the instant anyone came in here. Harry, that's brilliant."
Harry grinned. "I knew there had to be something we could do," he said.
"Right, here." Hermione used her wand to carve a circular wooden medallion from a piece of furniture. "Bill, show me a rune on the vanishing cabinet that Death Eater would absolutely have to mortify to fix it." Bill examined the cabinet and quickly found one, a prominent Rado rune with a large crack through it. She copied it onto the medallion with a protean charm and turned it into a necklace, which she handed to Harry. "Here, Harry," she said. "It was your idea. You should take it."
"Thanks, Hermione." He put the necklace on. "Let's go. Sirius will want to see this."
They left the room, but there was one snag in their plan. Just as they were on their way out, a ghost swooped down out of nowhere and stood in their path. Hermione didn't remember ever seeing this ghost up close. She would have been beautiful in life, young, with shiny, waist-length hair, but right now she looked angry. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. Hermione looked to Bill for guidance. Bill looked surprised. "The Grey Lady," he said. "You can talk." "Just because I find a few people worthwhile to talk to," the ghost said. "What are you doing with my mother's diadem?" "Your mother's?" Hermione gasped. The Grey Lady jerked her head in her direction and regarded her for a moment. "In life I was Helena Ravenclaw," she said. "Her daughter," Bill whispered. "I had no idea." "Of course," Hermione said. "The only ghosts who don't show up on the map by their real names are her and the Bloody Baron. They must have died before the words were finished. I'm surprised a ghost from the 11th century can speak modern English so well." The Grey Lady, Helena, twitched when Hermione mentioned the Baron, but said nothing, nor did she respond to Hermione's compliment. "What makes you think we have the diadem?" Bill asked cautiously. "I can sense its presence," she said. "Or rather, I could. It vanished from my perception, and then you exited the room where it was hidden. You must have it."
Bill started.
"I warn you, whatever you want my mother's diadem for, you cannot use it. It is under a dark curse."
"Yes, we know that," Bill said. Now Helena looked surprised.
"You know?" she said. "Yes," Hermione said. "That's why we needed to find it. We're going to find a way to lift the curse." "To lift the curse?"
Helena looked taken aback. "We need to lift the curse to defeat you-know-who, the Dark Lord," Bill said.
"I know of whom you speak," the ghost said. "At one time I knew him as Tom Riddle. He was charming, flattering. He seemed to understand me. He asked me about the diadem, and I told him, when I've told no one else. I had no idea."
Suddenly, Harry pulled off his invisibility cloak. If Helena was startled, she didn't show it. "You know who could be like that, Helena," Harry said. "He could be charming when he wanted to be. You weren't the first person he fooled."
"When was this, Helena?" Hermione said with some concern. "It's hard to remember exactly. When he was at school."
Hermione's eyebrows rose. Ghosts had poor long-term memories. She'd seen that with Myrtle and others. For Helena to remember the young Tom Riddle meant he must have had a truly traumatic impact on her afterlife. Helena regarded them for a minute.
"You believe you can lift the curse?" she asked. "We have one way that will definitely work," Hermione assured her. "We're going to try a few other things first to see if we can lift the curse without damaging it."
Helena's face suddenly turned hard again.
"Even if you do, the diadem will be of no use to you. You would do better to dispose of it now." "What do you mean?" Hermione said worriedly. She lowered her gaze and turned away from them. "I stole my mother's diadem," she said in a whisper. "That is my great shame. I sought to become more brilliant and powerful than my mother, so I took the diadem that she had hoarded for herself. I fled all the way to Illyria so that she could not find me." "Illyria?" Hermione asked. "Modern-day Albania," Bill said. "I tried to use the diadem," Helena continued, "but I could not. I had seen my mother use it. When she wore it she was brilliant beyond measure. She performed feats of magic that should have been impossible. too difficult and too intricate to comprehend, yet she did them as easily as breathing. But when I wore it, it only drove me to madness. I was thrown into a world of unfathomable light and noise. I could barely focus enough to remove the diadem, let alone cast a spell. I was unworthy. In my anger, I refused to return home. I still tried to make the diadem obey me, but it never did. Even when my mother grew ill and lay dying, I did not return. When I refused, the man she had sent to retrieve me, who had claimed he loved me, stabbed me in a rage, and then killed himself when he realized what he had done. "My God!" Hermione whispered. She saw, now, the silver bloodstains on Helena's robes. She had to ask. The pieces fit together too well. "The Baron?" Helena nodded. "Well, I'm sorry for the pain it's caused you, but this isn't about using the diadem. We have other reasons for needing to cleanse it without destroying it. It's the learning how that's more important."
"Helena," Harry cut in, "you can't tell anyone about this. If this gets back to you-know-who, he'll take action, and we'll never be able to beat him." The ghost looked between the three of them.
"I will keep your secret, Gryffindors. I want to see Tom Riddle destroyed as much as anyone. May you find success in your fight." Thank you, Lady Helena," Hermione said, and with that the ghost floated away, and they left the castle in peace. Aside from various Weasleys, Sirius was the only person Harry and Hermione had told about the Horcruxes. They would have told Remus, but he was off in another safe house now. The only other people they might have considered were Professor McGonagall and Septima. However, McGonagall had enough on her plate as it was, and Septima wasn't an Order member. Snape also knew, but it was best not to give away too much to the double agent. Hermione offered to bring in George and Fred on the discussion, and she insisted they could be serious enough, and Harry offered to bring in Ron and Ginny via his mirror, but Bill vetoed involving his siblings, and Sirius agreed that they should only involve full Order members in this talk. So it was that Harry, Hermione, Bill, and Sirius, hidden behind many concealing wards, sat in a circle like the Council of Elrond as Hermione withdrew it from her carrying case and levitated it onto the coffee table. "You told me that Dumbledore said it was too dangerous to leave a Horcrux intact once we find it," Sirius said. "Yes, he did," Hermione said. "But I don't follow Dumbledore's advice blindly any more. I haven't followed him blindly ever since Sturgis Podmore was kissed in Azkaban."
"But do we really need it, though?" asked Bill. "You have a way to destroy it, don't you?"
"Yes, I could destroy it right this minute with my basilisk's fang," she confirmed. "But it could still be useful."
Sirius scoffed. "Useful how? It's corrupted to hell and back by dark magic."
"Because," she said, "if we keep the diadem intact, we can experiment on it. Use it to help us find a way to cure Harry."
Everyone glanced at Harry, who said nothing.
"If I can study a live Horcrux, I should be able to make much more progress on how to destroy it without destroying the vessel."
Bill frowned grimly. "Are you certain of that, Hermione?" he said. "I know how Horcruxes work. Are you sure it's not influencing you?" She shook her head.
"I suppose I can't completely rule out that it is, but I was thinking about this even before we went for the ring. I need a specimen to study, and we have a reliable way to destroy it quickly if something goes wrong."
In her mind, however, she was second-guessing herself. That such a valuable historical artifact, and one that might yet have useful powers despite what Helena had said, would be destroyed was abhorrent to her. And if she could cleanse it without destroying it, she might be able to use it, or at least to see why Helena had failed. That part sounded uncomfortably like the Horcrux's influence, and she would have to guard against it, but it was still true that she needed a specimen to study. "I can definitely get behind helping Harry like that," Sirius said. "But the danger is, what if you start tampering with it and you alert you-know-who to it somehow?" "Dumbledore said you-know-who wasn't human enough to feel his Horcruxes anymore," Harry spoke up. "Besides, if he could feel anything, it'd be when they're destroyed, and we've already been doing that." "Fair enough," Sirius said.
"Frankly, I'm more worried about if the diadem is damaged or if we have to destroy it before I can figure out the answer," Hermione said. "We won't get many chances."
Everyone stared at each other in silence for a minute, and Harry spoke up again. "I think we need to go to the cave.